Ridiculous.
Ridiculous, but I bet it was for a significant amount of money.
Still ridiculous.
Yeah, but fun. I'd watch it. Look, Jake Paul wants to test himself against actual, not just world champion, but one of the greatest of all time.
Really fought, and it wasn't fixed. Jake Paul would not survive 45 seconds.
I don't know about that. I think it would take a few rounds.
Really?
But yeah. First of all, Jake is a lot bigger. Jake's a lot bigger.
But what weight would they fight?
Well,
it's not about the number. If it was about the number, we could have started up. I would have tell you, I'm not just interested. It makes no sense for me. It's not my what I'm looking at right now.
So, Joe Rogan was absolutely floored when he heard that Jake Paul offered Francis Ngannou a fight. This came after his matchup with Gervonta Davis got canceled. Right on his podcast, Rogan called it insane and borderline reckless for Jake. Ngannou, the UFC veteran turned boxing powerhouse, is seriously one of the most dangerous punchers out there. Rogan really questioned if Jake knew what he was getting himself into. But hey, he also said it would be a massive spectacle if it ever actually went down.
Francis knows that, and Nikista calls Francis. This is Francis telling the story. Nikista calls Francis and says, hey, we need your help. We need an opponent for Jake. Tank is out. And Francis says, all right. And Francis says, well, how can I help you? And Nikista says, well, we're looking at an opponent for Jake. Tank Davis is out. And Francis says, all right, but specifically, how can I help you? Nikista takes a third swing at the bat. He says, well, we need an opponent. We need a boxer. We need a partner. We need somebody to fight Jake. Tank is out. And Francis asks him again, okay, what specifically?
When Jake Paul's fight with Gervonta Davis completely fell apart, mainly because of those serious legal issues piling up against Davis, Jake and his team were scrambling, trying to find someone else to fight. And get this, Francis Ngannou's name actually came up. He's that former UFC heavyweight champion who crossed over into boxing, and honestly, his size, power, and reputation make him one of the scariest guys in striking sports, period.
Tank Davis saga, I think the fight is going to be completely canceled and rescheduled, and now we have potential opponent names and some people being ruled out coming into today. This is not a joke. It was said by Mike Coppinger and others that the #1 candidate to replace Tank Davis in a Jake Paul fight, probably on a different date, was going to be Francis Ngannou. What the f? But we have an update on that and other potential names that Jake could fight. Again, I think on a separate date, and why I think the Jake and Tank fight is completely off. No more, maybe, no more, we don't think it'll happen. I think it's completely off.
Now, Michael Bisping really highlighted this crazy size difference in the rumored Jake Paul versus Francis Ngannou fight. He pointed out that Jake's original opponent was Gervonta Davis, right? A much smaller lightweight. Going from Davis to Ngannou. Bisping said that puts Jake on completely opposite ends of the spectrum in terms of physical challenge. He stressed that this jump isn't just a mismatch in skill, it's about raw mass, reach, and just how legitimately dangerous Ngannou is.
Older than him, like Mike Tyson, who's 58, Anderson Silva, who was way past his prime, people like Nate Diaz, who were way smaller. Gervonta Davis really did take the piss. I mean, that was just the craziest shout ever. To go from fighting Gervonta Davis, way smaller, to now fighting boxing Francis Ngannou. I mean, listen, if he does it, fair play. But I just call #1 bullshit on this brother, because I don't see this happening. No.
This is #1 bullshit.
I just don't believe it. I don't believe it at all. Nate Diaz, yeah, 100%. I mean, he beat him once already. I'm sure Nate Diaz would love to get another big payday, because obviously boxing on Netflix and going up against Jake Paul, given his success, given the name that he has, and given the magnitude of his events, Nate Diaz will get paid an absolute fortune once again. We know that it wasn't too long ago Jake Paul was talking about boxing Anthony Joshua, and that never came to fruition. There's absolutely no way he would box Anthony Joshua. If he did, if he was to do something like that, whether it be Anthony Joshua or Francis Ngannou, I'd give him his props. I'd give him his credit. And you never know. Maybe he would do it just for the clout, because in many ways it would be, sorry about the airport notifications, it would be, you know, an admirable thing to do, and it would be Jake Paul taking on somebody big.
Plus, Ngannou is obviously bigger and has way more experience. So Francis Ngannou himself said that Jake Paul's team reaching out to him as a replacement for Gervonta Davis totally caught him off guard. He said the offer just came out of nowhere and didn't really fit with what he's trying to do right now. And while money was definitely on the table, Ngannou still turned it down. He said the whole situation and terms just didn't make sense for him. He even questioned how anyone could think switching from Davis to him was a logical option. For him, this wasn't about the money, it was about the fight actually making professional sense.
I want you to fight Jake to replace Gervonta. I'm like, who's Jake? You know, like, I was so confused, you know, like, I wasn't expecting that at all. And he said, yeah, Jake Paul, you know, he's fighting. And I'm like, no, bro, come on. Don't disrespect me like that. And then they even say like, they even come out after and say, and what if the number are good? He sent out some number. I'm like, it's not about the number. If it was about the number, we could have started talk. I would have tell you, I'm not just interested. It makes no sense for me. It's not my what I'm looking at right now.
Daniel Cormier, another former UFC champ, had a really blunt warning for Jake Paul about fighting Francis Ngannou. Cormier just highlights Ngannou's devastating power and this huge mismatch in experience and sheer physicality. He's basically saying Paul just isn't ready for a striking heavyweight coming from MMA. Cormier makes it clear that Paul could face some serious consequences here, stepping in with someone whose strengths are way beyond anyone Paul has ever faced. The message is simple. This isn't just about money or putting on a show. The risk completely outweighs any reward.
Jake Paul goes from fighting Gervonta Davis to calling out Francis Ngannou. Jake Paul don't want those problems. I can't say it any different. Jake Paul does not want any Francis Ngannou problems. He don't. He does not want those issues. While I think it's crazy and I credit him for doing that, and I'm surprised he did that, this could be a ploy. Him poking out his chest, saying, I want Francis. He don't want those Francis Ngannou problems. I don't care what Anthony Joshua did to Francis Ngannou. Jake Paul gets in there with Francis. Francis will knock his head off this planet. You don't want those Francis problems. I watched Francis put down Tyson Fury. Sure, Anthony Joshua beat him. But even if Jake got power, I don't think he got power to be dealing with Francis. Because all it takes is for one to land and he gonna put you out.
Cormier also questioned Jake's motives, suggesting this is way more about publicity than any real competition. He thinks Jake is completely underestimating what it takes to fight a heavyweight who can punch straight through gloves. Ngannou's power is legendary in MMA, right? But in boxing, it gets even more focused. Cormier warned that if Jake steps into that ring with Francis without truly grasping the difference between MMA striking and boxing defense, it could be an incredibly short night for him.
Start, right? Boxing is much different than mixed martial arts. The target audience might be the same, but the demographics different. The places where people are brought up are different. There's bigger entourages in boxing. It's just a different world in boxing. We've known that from the very beginning. We know that Gervonta Davis was not going to just play to Jake Paul's rules. I still don't know exactly why this thing is falling apart, but it is falling apart bad. It is bursting at the seams. We are almost exactly where we should have never started. This should have never gotten started, but it did. But we are almost now exactly where we need to be in the fight, and that's it being off.
Look, a lot of analysts flagged this whole Jake Paul versus Francis Ngannou proposal as super risky, especially on such short notice. It's risky for Jake and for the whole boxing narrative too. They pointed out that Gervonta Davis pulled out late, which made Jake's team reach out to Ngannou. But Francis himself said, stepping in that late just makes zero strategic sense for his career. This short notice means Jake wouldn't even have time to properly prep for a heavyweight with Ngannou's elite power and experience. Many analysts are actually comparing this proposed fight to the real bout between Tyson Fury and Ngannou. Their reasoning is all about crossover appeal, the stylistic mismatch, and just the spectacle over real boxing merit. Remember how Fury, even as the heavyweight champ, faced Ngannou and struggled way more than people expected? He even said Ngannou gave him one of his toughest fights in a decade. A Paul Ngannou fight would follow that same playbook. A social media boxer stepping up to face this monstrous athlete with elite power.
About this is, okay, if they push it back to December, then that's slightly different. But this is the kind of one situation where you're kind of 10 days out, 2 weeks out from a fight, whenever they first got wind of this problem. This is the kind of situation where it would be possible that Jake Paul and Nikita Badarian and MVP, who are very, very shrewd people, this is the one occasion where they might end up making a mistake, taking someone at short notice who they shouldn't take. Because there'd be a whole raft of people putting their hand up for it, wouldn't they? Thinking, I'll take him at short notice. I'll make out that I've been sitting on a beach eating and drinking for the last 6 months. I'll but anything just to get in there with him, and then on the night, I'm gonna knock his head off. There'll be loads of people putting their hand up for this, and you'd have to be incredibly careful about who you took at short notice, because for it to have any kind of meaning, you would need to take a decent opponent at short notice, because obviously they're up against it because it's short notice. You couldn't take some barely warm body at short notice, because that would be even worse than giving them full notice. So this is the one area, the one situation in which it would be easy for them to make a mistake, but they don't make mistakes with things like this. They just don't. So yeah, I'm not surprised that they haven't been tempted into, somebody. Yeah, Ngannou, that'd be a mistake. It'd be such a mistake. I know he got flattened by Joshua, but so what? Joshua is a 2-time unified champion of the world, and Ngannou's 270 pounds of absolute granite. That would have been a terrible, terrible mistake if they'd given him the fight.
And he dropped, like, people. I know, my opinion, Tyson Fury won that fight with Ngannou, but he still put Tyson Fury.
He was close.
Chael Sonnen also weighed in on this potential Jake Paul versus Francis Ngannou matchup, and you could hear a mix of amusement and genuine curiosity in his voice. He basically said that from a pure sports perspective, this fight just isn't a traditional balanced contest. It's really more about seeing how much punishment Jake Paul can actually take. Sonnen reminded everyone that when Ngannou fought Tyson Fury, a seasoned heavyweight with real boxing skills and a size advantage over Jake, it only took one clean shot to drop him. So, if Fury had trouble surviving Ngannou's power, the idea that Jake could just walk through those same punches without a major risk, that just seems totally far-fetched.
When Francis says fighting Jake Paul wouldn't make sense, well, what in the hell do you think Tyson Fury got for boxing you? These aren't mean things from me. This is a reality. Tyson Fury knew there was a check. Name one person you'd rather see Jake Paul fight than Francis Ngannou. Is a real challenge. How Tyron Woodley, Ben Askren, Anderson Silva, Mike Tyson, how those aren't real challenges, I don't know. But this is the story as we're told. And do you see where that would satisfy so much? Do you see where that would force even the biggest hater to be quiet? And my job for something to make sense is the biggest check against the easiest opponent. I cannot think of anything I would rather.
Jake Paul has really made a name for himself with huge promotions and these attention-grabbing stunts, but this time, it feels like the idea just isn't connecting. Unlike his previous fights, where opponents were closer to his weight and experience, this one just feels totally unbalanced in Jake's direction. Observers are starting to think that Jake's strategy of staying relevant through these unusual matchups might finally be losing its punch. There's a growing feeling that this event is all about getting attention, not genuine competition. And that explains why ticket sales haven't even gone up, even after weeks of advertising and interviews.
And it's an exhibition and he's retired. Tank still being in the competitive nature of the sport throws this one completely off for me. And the fact that Jake is like 60 pounds bigger than he is. Right? Like, Mike was obviously far older than Jake, and that was the big knock on that fight. Mike should not have been in there with Jake. Said that many times. Jake has fought so hard against people saying he's bad for the sport. He's bad for the sport. He doesn't actually want to fight or step up or do any of this stuff. And I've kind of had his back when I'm like, no, he is doing what most boxers have done early in their career. But this gives those people more ammo to be like, yeah, bro, look, this is what we're talking about. When we say he's bad for the sport, or when we say that he's doing stuff that doesn't make sense and he's making a mockery of things, this is what they're talking about. And again, I wouldn't have any problem with it if Tank was way past the point where he could fight competitively at his weight class and have fights with guys like Shakur Stevens, or even, again, rematching guys like Ryan Garcia.
Chael Sonnen also adds that Jake's confidence in his willingness to take on fighters way above his level, sure, that's entertaining, but stepping in with someone like Francis Ngannou is just a completely different animal. Sonnen stresses that Jake simply doesn't have the size, power, or even the chin that Tyson Fury has, and if Fury could only take one punch from Ngannou, honestly, it's really hard to imagine Jake taking even that.
Involved bludgeoning. You can't even grab a hold of the guy or try to squeeze him. You can only bludgeon and be bludgeoned back. I think you're got an uphill battle to question somebody. But they have been very effective in doing just that to Jake. Hey, you know, you start with this NBA guy, and then even those MMA guys, you know, they're not boxers. And then when you got around to the boxers, but they weren't current boxers. Then when you get around to the current boxers, they're not big enough boxers. And I just loved it. When I heard that Francis Ngannou might be going against Jake, I loved it. I mean, what's that gonna look like? How many of those shots from Francis can you take? Tyson Fury, if you're talking clean, Tyson Fury only took one. Everything else, Tyson was able to roll with. Big Francis only had to hit him one time. Like, that's a compelling story, in my opinion.
Tim Bradley really highlighted how the cancellation of that planned Davis versus Jake Paul fight had consequences way beyond just those two guys. It wasn't just a matchup falling through. Bradley pointed out that promoters, broadcasters, event venues, sponsors, marketing partners, everyone lost money when that deal collapsed. The fight was supposed to bring in huge pay-per-view sales and tons of sponsorship revenue, but Davis's legal troubles forced networks to pull back and brands to protect their images.
Let's get on Tank real quick. You gotta be the dumbest dude, in the history of boxing, bro. $40 million, dog, down the drain. You gotta be the dumbest dude I've ever seen in the history of boxing, bro. Seriously. I'm like, $40 million, bro. Wealth. Literally wealth, bro. Going down the drain. I don't understand it. I can't make the... I don't understand it. But I'll tell you this. You know, MVP promotions, whatever the hell y'all call it, most valuable promotions, shit, more like rookie promotions. Yeah, more like rookie promotions. You didn't know what you were dealing with. You had no clue. This has always been down Tank's alley, man. Now, let me just say one thing. You know, you innocent until proven guilty.
Meanwhile, a ton of money had already been spent on production, promotion, and all the logistics. And much of that investment, it's probably just gone now. Bradley used this whole situation to show how tricky the commercial side of boxing really is. When one fighter's reputation takes a hit, everyone who backed that event ends up paying the price. Now, let's talk about this potential Jake Paul versus Francis Ngannou showdown. It's such a stark contrast in size and power, and it demands a totally different approach from Jake. Ngannou, a heavyweight who's typically around 260 pounds, brings a level of raw strength that rivals the hardest punchers in all of combat sports. Jake, though, he's used to facing much lighter opponents and building his game on speed, movement, and spectacle, not survival. For Jake to even begin to compete against a force like Ngannou, his training camp would need a dramatic pivot. We're talking about everything from increasing muscle mass and improving durability to completely rethinking his footwork, sparring dynamics, and conditioning. What works for lightweight opponents simply won't cut it when you're facing a heavyweight who hits like a freight train. In short, many analysts truly believe Paul cannot treat this matchup like just another influencer boxing spectacle. He would need months of serious, specialized preparation with top coaches if this fight were to make any competitive sense at all.
It would be something unique. It would be something incredible. It's the same reason that I would be intrigued by a Jake Paul versus Anthony Joshua fight, although I would never advise Jake Paul to take a Anthony Joshua fight. I wouldn't advise him to take a Francis Ngannou fight either, because as much as Anthony is far better, which we saw when they actually fought, Joshua slept Francis Ngannou quicker than me after 2 melatonin. I mean, it was quick, fast, in a hurry, completely dominant. But we also saw Francis Ngannou go toe-to-toe with the heavyweight champion of the world at that time. Yes, he was out of shape. We understand that. But Tyson Fury on that night got the shock of his life when Francis Ngannou not only went toe-to-toe, but put him down and danced on it. To this day, I think that fight could have gone Francis's way. Point being, there are levels to this shit. Not just in boxing, but in combat in general. And the size difference Francis would have over Jake would be incredible, but it would have been a great event, and a lot of people would have tuned in. Francis, though, is saying that's not happening.
How can they go from like Gervonta Davis to Francis Ngannou? Like, I mean, Gervonta Davis is a fantastic boxer, but and is a one-shot knockout artist. But come on, like the weight different and everything, it makes no sense.
It's a good point. I mean, obviously, Francis is right about the weight difference, but it's a good point in general for what do you do next? Jake has sparred guys like Shakur Stevenson, Ray Ford, Montana Love to try to prepare for Tank Davis. And even if you book this fight on December 12th or December 19th, that's still a completely different fight than you were going into. Completely different matchup, size-wise, skill-wise, the things that you're going to need to even try to compete if it's someone like a Francis Ngannou.
Is this matchup a thrilling high-risk event or a...
So, the big question is, will this happen, or is it truly a mismatch that just should never happen in the first place?